Today in our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 2500, we're going to take a look at and show you how to install the Firestone Air Command 1 compressor system with analog gauge. This offers the heavy-duty single-path compressor. Part number is F2097. Now here's our control gauge. This gauge is going to allow us to make adjustments to the air pressure in our bags from the cab of our truck. This is really nice. We don't have to get out in the weather to change it. We don't have to worry about air hoses or anything like that. Basically, pressing down releases air. Pressing up is going to increase our air pressure. And so we can see it whether it's day or night. When you turn on your running lights, it'll illuminate the gauge for you. And when they're off, you're going to go right off. Now here's the compressor portion of the system. Basically this is Firestone's heavy duty compressor. This works great. This is a 2500 truck, but they use these things on tow trucks, RVs, off-road vehicles. It gives you a good amount of airflow. This even has a high enough flow rate that you can use storage tanks. If you wanted to do a half-gallon or a gallon storage tank on the truck, this would be more than enough compressor to handle that for you. Now when comparing this compressor to other compressors, typically you're going to be comparing it to like a standard duty compressor. Those just don't have the capacity, they don't have the duty cycle to be able to handle an onboard tank or be able to handle quickly adjusting the airbags. Typically takes longer for those to make the adjustments, especially when you've got a load already on your truck and you're trying to level it. That brings those pressures up higher, and that's where these heavy duty compressors really come in handy. Now this compressor system will work with all types of airbags. You're not limited to just adding this to a Firestone kit. As long as it uses the 1/4 inch standard DOT style brake line, this compressor system will work flawlessly for you. Now to begin our installation, we need to get our compressor mounted. Typically we use the frame rail down here someplace protected. The inside area is pretty congested. This is a diesel model, so there's not a lot of room in there. We're going to come to the outside frame rail. We'll go right behind this body mount. This is going to give us a little bit of protection. We won't have to worry about a lot of dirt and debris being kind of put up on the compressor here. And just find an area up high enough. You don't want it to make contact with your cable here. So keep it low enough so even if that moves, it's not going to hit anything. Looks like right there is good. I'm just going to use a center punch, and I want to mark my holes out. Now we're going to be replacing the bolts that are supplied with the kit with some number 10 self-tapping screws. This is a box frame, so you don't have any opportunity to get to the back side. This will allow you to still mount your compressor without having to worry about that. I'm just going to use the screw itself to get it started here. Now we want to do that at all 4 of our marked locations. And once we have all of our holes drilled out, we'll start securing it. You can see in each location you're going to place on one of those provided flat washers just to kind of cover up our bushing there. Now we want to slightly compress that rubber bushing, but we don't want to crush that brass insert. So just be gentle with how much torque you put on it. All right, there we go. Nice and secure. But our rubber grommets are going to make it so that we don't feel vibration all the way through our truck when the compressor kicks on. Now we're going to take care of mounting our gauge. Now this you can put just about anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be in a certain orientation, but you can see the way the bracket is, it's designed. You have to go on the dashboard. I think we're going to be putting ours right underneath this edge right here. It'll still give you plenty of room to operate your pedals. It'll keep this down and out of the way. Now the area I would avoid on the dash would be over here on the left side. Typically you're going to bump into that with your right knee as you're getting out. Once I have that where I want it here, I'm just going to mark one side of it so I can get a hole started. Now once I've got that marked, I'm going to use a 5/32 bit. I'm going to get that drilled out. We're going to be using the same style self-tapping screws as we did for our compressor. I'm just going to mock this up for now so I can determine where my other hole location should be. Now on this side, we've got a little bit of a gap there that we need to make up the difference on. So I'm going to place my screw through, and we've got leftover washers. So I'm going to place that right down on top. We'll have 4 of them there. That should take up that gap. Now we'll be bringing some air lines and some wires into the truck. There's going to be a grommet down here on the floor. I like to come up and through to get in. What we need to do is lift up this trim panel here. It's just going to have clips. Just keep lifting towards the back. You just get that removed. Now for the kick panel here, we want to lift up, get our fingers in behind it, lift on the hood latch, and then just pull rearward on that. That'll allow you the room you need to pull the carpeting up. You'll see that grommet's going to be right there. Already has a couple wires that's brought up through it. Now what I'm going to do is pass an airline tube down through that grommet. You can also use a stiff piece of wire or a coat hanger. I just want something down below the truck that I can attach the things to use this to pull them through. We've got our 2 main components in place, so now we're going to start making some connections. We've got our relay harness here. It's pre-made. It's going to come with the kit. And this is going to use a signal to switch the power on and off to the compressor. So we're not going to have to worry about our switch and it burning out very rapidly. We're going to bring this, we need to mount it within this orange wire's length of our compressor, which isn't really going to be hard to do. I mean, we're going right up here. The battery's not too far forward. So we're going to be doing something like this. I'll bring my wires from my compressor up and around that body mount, see how far they'll go up there. Pretty reasonable distance. The reason I want to do that, I'm going to ground this behind the relay. That way we only make one extra hole here in the frame. We'll mount that ground about right there. To do this, I'm going to use a number 12 self-tapping screw. Through our relay, through our ground stud, and then tighten that down. Now we need to connect the red wire coming from the compressor to the orange wire from our relay. Now you can see it does have a spade connector. You can plug that in. If you do that, I definitely fill this up with silicone. You don't want to have the corrosion getting in there causing issues. What we're going to do, and I think it would be a preferred method for you, is splice these together using a heat shrink butt connector. It'll just prevent any corrosion down the road. So start by trimming that red wire. I'm going to strip it back. I'm going to add on part number DW05745. Crimp down on there. Bring our orange wire up. Just cut that off and strip it back. And that's going to go right into the other side there. Now we're going to use a heat source to shrink that down. You can use a lighter like we're using. You could use a little mini torch or a heat gun, of course. We just want to give gentle heat to that. You see how the wire looks like it magnifies? There's going to be a little clear gel that comes out of the end. It's going to definitely give us superior corrosion resistance than the other spade connectors. Now to keep this all protected and keep corrosion to a minimum, I like to use some black silicone sealant. Just going to fill in around each of those wires. Make sure we won't have any water getting in there. That's the first part. The second part, I'm going to do the same thing on top here. Completely cover that. And when we put our plug on our relay now, that's going to seal up all the way around. That should keep any issues with moisture to a minimum. Now we can use a couple zip ties and just tidy up our wires here. I'm going to run these 2 up. They're going to go right along with this wire loom. And back here at our compressor, remember we don't want those wires to touch our parking brake cable. So we've also zip tied those back. Now once we get to our grommet location here, we're going to let our white wire just rest there. We want to continue running the red wire up to the battery. We're going to go to the one located on the driver's side. If you have a gas engine, you might have a single battery, so you might have to go to the other side. Just draw our wire on up from underneath. Remember, plenty of zip ties on this to keep it nice and secure. Now you should be able to run this all the way around the back side of the fuse box here. Got a wire loom coming out of that fuse box we can zip tie off to. That'll just keep any of our wire from ever wanting to hang down below the vehicle. Now on our fuse holder side, we want to pull out on this little tab and wiggle it to take the cap off. You can see inside we've got a 25 amp fuse. We're going to pull that off. We want to set those aside. We're going to put that back in at the very last step. But we can get this connection made now so we have it out of the way. See, the end's going to be stripped off there. And we're going to add on to that a 10 to 12 gauge ring terminal. Pull up the red cover here. And underneath you'll see this stud. We're going to put our ring terminal right underneath that. And we'll grab a 14mm socket, and we want to take the nut off of that stud. Bring my fuse holder up and around. Place my ring terminal over and re-secure it. Now after we get our fuse and we get that cap put back on, we'll just zip tie that down here to the cable, which runs right there. It'll be easy to find. Now on the top side of the compressor, you'll see the brass fitting sticking off there. I'm going to pull that cap off, and we've got a 1/4 inch push to connect fitting there. You see that thread sealant on those threads. When you get that in there hand tight, then we're going to tighten that down. We want to be sure that those threads go well down inside. To do this, you want to use a 1/2 inch wrench. Now we'll take our air line. You want a really nice flush cut on the end there. I'm going to place that in, and you're going to feel it stop. Then from that point, you want to press in about another 1/4 inch. About to there. You should be able to pull that without it coming out. Now we can run from our compressor here up to the grommet. This air line, we want to go inside of the truck to our gauge. Now I use a lot of zip ties, and I typically always run out. So if you're in the same boat, you might want to have some extras on hand. Now we want to run from our driver's side airbag up to that grommet in the floor. Our compressor is going to deliver air to the gauge, and then this line is going to deliver air back to both airbags. Just be careful when routing it. You don't want to drag it over any sharp edges or any pinch points or anything that might damage your hose. And we'll bring the end of that line right into the top of our fitting. Now to get our bags connected together so as we operate our switch, it's going to air up both of them evenly. We'll come right up here on the frame. We're going to cut our air line there. Then we can add in the T. So that's going to push in. Same thing up here. Like that. And we'll connect the line there to run over to the passenger side bag. And we're going to determine how much line we're going to need to make it into our gauge. We should have plenty, especially with the leftover air line you'll have from your airbags. You had to have air line back there too, so we should have more than enough here. I'm going to trim this off. We'll connect this to the T, then over to the passenger bag. All right, I'm just going to bring that up and over here. Now once I'm over top of the fuel tank, I like to go right across this round tube. Acts as a cross member there. And with some longer zip ties, or if you join a couple zip ties together, you can get around there and get your line secured. We'll measure off the line we need. And we're going to put that on top of the bag. Now before we do, your original airline kit should have came with some of these protective covers. I'm going to put those on just to further protect from the exhaust here. Just get them slid on there anywhere it might be close, and that'll keep us really safe. Won't have to worry about any heat issues. All right, we're just going to run this line right up to our grommet. Same situation, follow along with the wire loom here. Gives us a good anchor to zip tie off to. Now something I like to do is just grab a marker and mark one of your lines. It doesn't matter which one you mark. When they come up through the floorboard there, it can be pretty hard to determine which is which. So let's get one marked with some black marker, yellow marker, whatever you got, just so you know which is which. Now the air line that we brought down through, or the pull wire, whatever you decided to use, we're going to start taping off our white wire from our compressor and our two air lines too. Now I cut that spade connector off the end of the white wire. That's going to make it slide through there a lot easier. But I'm also going to use a butt connector inside of the truck. We just always switch them out instead of using the spade connector. Now we'll just start gently pulling up on our air line, maybe helping out from the bottom here, just to get that passed up and through. Now the last installation step we have on the outside of the truck will be to put the barbed fitting into the inlet on the compressor. We use a 14 millimeter, get that tightened down. With that secure, we can slide on the black hose in the kit that's in the filter kit. And now we're going to run this back and over that body mount. Now you'll take your filter element cartridge and we're going to slide that right up on the line. And we want to leave a loop, and just like that, I'm going to zip tie that off right up here to the fuel filler line. Now we'll take our hoses and our wire. We're going to run it up behind the carpeting here. Gives us a nice area to just tuck it down out of the way. Now we're going to start by connecting our white wire. We want the one that's closest to the center of the vehicle here. That's going to go to the white wire that came in from our compressor. So we're going to trim both of those off with the appropriate length, and we'll strip both sides back. And we're going to use part number DW05744 to connect them. Be another heat shrink butt connector. And we'll get that connector shrank down just like we did the one outside. Now we've got two black wires coming from the light for our gauge. We want to choose one of these. We're going to turn it into a ground. I'm going to trim that off. And this wire also needs to run to a ground. So I'm going to merge these or splice these together so we can just use one wire to go to ground. So we're going to trim them back, strip both of them, place those together. Give them a good twist to get them like one wire. We'll slide on our butt connector and we'll crimp it down. Now you should have a pretty good amount of white wire left that came up from the compressor. So we're going to use that to go in the other side of that butt connector, and we can run it over to our ground source. Now I'm going to run this wire over toward the door. Go up over top of our OBD port. Get a little group of wires right here. Right behind that you're going to see a bolt. That's the one we'll use for our ground stud. We'll use a 13 millimeter socket to remove it. So get that trimmed off to adequate length. Strip that back, and I'm going to go about twice as far. I want to double this up and put on the connector. Take that bolt, place it right back through, and get that threaded back in. Now we're going to take what we got left of our white wire there, we want to get it stripped back. Add on another one of our blue heat shrink butt connectors, and we'll get our other black wire from behind our gauge stripped, and that'll go to the other side of our butt connector. Now this wire is going to be the one that lights up our gauge, so we want this to go not to a power source but to an illumination circuit. So that would be a wire that becomes hot, or a wire that has 12 volt signal when the running lights are on. We're going to look right in behind this panel where your four-wheel drive and light selector is. And this panel has 3 clips along the bottom and 3 along the top that we'll want to separate. We're going to look at the wiring bundle that comes out of the back of the switch, which would be closer to the door. And this brown wire with the white stripe should be the one we need, but let's test that out and make sure. So we're just going to use a standard test light. Run one end to ground, the other side will connect to our wire there. Now when we turn on the running lights, it should light up. Turn them off, it'll go off. Tells us we have the wire we're looking for. Now we can go over that OBD2 sensor, and if you look in there, you'll actually be able to see your hand. Just bring the wire right up here to us. So with both sides of that spliced back, we want to join our gauge wire with it. Slide on another one of our heat shrink connectors, get that crimped down. And then that'll go on the other side of our wire. That all shrank down, connected properly. Let's line our panel back up here. Just push it back in. All right, now the last thing we're going to do is get our air lines plugged in. Remember the one we marked black? That's going to be the one that comes from the airbags, and that needs to go on the barbed fitting coming out of the back of the gauge. The other one will go to the fitting that's over here just above our white wires. Now we'll just use some zip ties. We want to get everything tidied up. Now to finish up inside here, we want to put our kick panel back in place. And we'll put our scuff plate back in as well. Just need to put that fuse back in, place the cap on it. Now we're going to test out the system. Let's start just by turning on the running lights. See, our gauge is going to illuminate there. Whether it's day or night, we'll be able to see it very clearly and know exactly what PSI we have set. Now to test our compressor out, so it'll hold up on that tab. You'll hear the compressor activate, and then the needle on our gauge is going to start to rise. Now if we press down, we should hear the air release. Now we've got about 30 pounds of air in our bags. We're going to go through and check all the connections at the top of each air spring and at the compressor to make sure we don't have any leaks. To do that, we'll use some soapy water. Now it's a good idea to use a little bit of that black silicone now. And we're going to go right around that grommet where we ran our lines in. Just going to help keep out any moisture, any dust, any exhaust gases, anything like that. With everything working properly, that completes our installation of the Firestone Air Command 1 compressor system, part number F2097, on our 2014 Chevrolet Silverado 2500.
Thanks for watching. Click the link in our description below to shop, learn more, or visit us at eTrailer.com, and leave a comment if you have any questions.